Great, thank you. Welcome back after your coffee break. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a new member of the team, the Launchpad team, Dr. Leanne Taylor. And we've got a really good session for you today. We've got an investor panel here for you. They're going to introduce themselves in a minute, but we've got the breadth of experience with regards to investment and funding here for you to ask questions. The format for the next hour is they're going to introduce themselves in under 10 minutes, because I really want to open the floor up for your burning questions that you have with regards to funding and investment. And based on your pitches yesterday, I'm sure you have loads of questions that you want to ask the panel. So, Thomas, do you want to just give us an overview of yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to stand or sit down?
Oh, yeah. Do you want me to stand?
Yes.
Okay, so good morning, I didn't expect physical exercise. So I'm Tomas Steonik, and just before I do the introduction, I'll put a couple of people out of their misery, because people are going to ask me, what's your accent, where are you from? And guesses have varied from Norwegian to Swedish, or what was it? Or Argentinian?
No.
Okay, so anyway, so I was born in what was then Yugoslavia and is now Slovenia. And so I stayed there for 16 years, and even when I was there, I set up my first little software consultancy business, and I've been building up technology businesses ever since. I came to Cambridge to study mathematics, and I did a couple of postdocs in computer science. After that, I set up, as I said, a couple of technology businesses, built them up, and as sort of time went on, contemporaries of mine from Cambridge would be sending me business plans. And I was doing a little bit of investment in public stock markets, and I'd get these business plans, and people would say, we think our business is worth 5 million, and by the way, we're losing a ton of money. So I said, this is a load of rubbish. Who would pay money for a business that's losing money? So I said, I'm not going to look at this. And so I kept rejecting those proposals several times, and then several of them became household names, and I missed out. They sold for hundreds of millions. One of them was, I think, was called figleaves.co.uk. It's a lingerie company that I had the opportunity to invest in, and I thought this is a money-losing company. It's a lot of rubbish, and it did very well. And another one was PowerSet, was a natural language search company that at the time was saying we're going to be the next Google, and I said that's a lot of rubbish. And then they sold to Microsoft for, I think, an undisclosed sum, which was probably about $100 million. So I better pay attention to this. So I looked at a couple in more detail, and I made a couple of investments. And the first couple, I had the misfortune that the first couple of angel investments I made like that made a very good return. So I made fantastic exits. One of them was a company that I just got a friend to put my name, put some money in a sort of friends and family round, or I think it was an employee round, and then it listed on Nasdaq. I think that was such a long time ago. I think it was about 66 times return on the original investment. And then the next one was a company called Skimlings that I exited in a Series B venture round, which was another good return. So I said, well, this is really good. So I started making lots more, and I do lots more now, but I haven't had quite so many such good exits since. So I'm mostly a technology investor. If I asked everybody here in this room, are you an above average driver, and you had the opportunity to answer secretly, right? I bet you that 80% of you would say that you're an above average driver. Probably only 50% of you are, right? So I take the same view that if I ask myself a question, am I an above average stock picker? I'm sure I would be arrogant and say yes, but I'm realistic enough to say to realize that probably I'm just average, right? So how do I make money by being an investor if I don't think I'm an above average stock picker? So what's the answer? Well, the answer in my case is that I think I'm not above average at picking stocks generally, but I think I am reasonably good at building businesses, and there's certain areas of domain expertise which I understand better than the average investor, where I have existing investments or existing businesses where I can add value, and I'm better at spotting the businesses where I can add value and then adding value. So I like to invest in businesses where I think I have a technological advantage over the average investor, and where I see an opportunity that where something's missing and where I can add value either by having market contact or domain expertise or other investments which I can connect in. So there you go, that's me. I think that's under 10 minutes, and if you have any questions, then please ask.
Sorry, can we just take your name again?
Yes, it's Tomas Slivnik, Slivnik.
Great, thank you, Thomas. Ollie?
Hi there, I am Ollie Hammond. I am a senior analyst at Syndicate Room. My background is nowhere near as impressive as Tomas, so I kind of wish I went first, but by the by. I don't have multiple degrees in mathematics and computer science. I have a BA. And that's not even from Cambridge. But my background is again relatively short. So I actually graduated uni back in 2014. So in terms of professionally, my career hasn't been that extensive yet. But I spent the first year of my career in London, in the city, working in banking and finance, which is horrible for anyone that's done it, and for those of you who haven't but might be thinking of it. That was at a very nice Scandinavian Swedish bank called Svenska Handelsbanken, who are a very, very nice bank and they're very good and they're Scandinavian, so they take care of you very, very well. But it was very, very boring sitting behind the same desk every day, so I decided I wanted to do something different. While at Handelsbanken, I ran a very small startup, and it was with my friend who worked in logistics, and it was a brokerage for space in containers on container ships. It was nothing innovative. It was nothing that was going to break the market. But what it was is it's something that gave me exposure to early stage companies. It gave me exposure to starting a company at a very early stage and getting it to a place where you're bringing customers on board. I then realised that this is something that I wanted to do more of. So I left Handelsbanken and I joined a startup, a very, very early stage startup. I was employee number 4. And after 4 months, that company went under. Nothing to do with me, don't worry. Effectively, I won't name names, but it was very interesting to watch as the CEO burned through huge amounts of cash in very silly circumstances. And it was great fun to watch as this empire was collapsing, very small empire, but it was collapsing around, and seeing what the CEO was trying to do to salvage it. From there, I then joined Syndicate Room, and I've been at Syndicate Room for over 2 years now. As an analyst, my benefit of being at Syndicate Room is quantity. And I've seen a lot of quantity in terms of companies that have come into us looking for funding. We probably see somewhere in the region of 150 to 200 companies every month who come to us looking for funding. And my role is to be a first point of contact. So I do a lot of events and I do a lot of networking and boring things like that. But I also do a lot of business plans. I look at a lot of business financials, things like that. And I will take that to our investment committee in order to see if this is something that we're interested in pursuing. Syndicate Room, for those who don't know, is an investment network. It's an online investment network for sophisticated and high net worth investors. We're best known for our online platform, which works almost identically to a crowdfunding platform. And in the early days, we would have been known as part of the crowdfunding market, and that's something we're very much pushing against now. We don't really want to be known as part of that market. We're also an alternate fund manager, and at the moment, our CEO and Chief Investment Officer are out and about. I haven't seen them for probably a week or so, as they travel around the country trying to secure the last investments into that fund, which is closing within the next 2 weeks. We actually deployed our first fund over the sort of the tax year 2017-2018. From that fund, we've deployed into 32 separate opportunities across 10 separate sectors, all EIS qualifying investments. And I've been very lucky that I've been able to have a very hands-on role with that, not necessarily in the deployment of the fund, but sourcing the businesses that the fund ultimately deployed into. It's a passive fund, so it deploys alongside our investors who come through the platform. So really, that's my experience over the last couple of years. I've seen a lot of businesses. I've spoken to a lot of people, and although my experience is nowhere near that of Tomas, it's great to be part from a very early stage in my career, to be very widely exposed to a lot of businesses. And hopefully going forward, that's something that I can be more and more exposed to, and really speaking to people like yourselves. That's key for me. It's getting access to the people who are hopefully going to produce the unicorns of the future, and that's really me.
Walter,
you.
over to you.
Well, I'm ancient and nearly extinct. This gentleman qualified in 2014. Well, 50 years earlier, I obtained a degree in sociology at the University of Durham. I then decided to destroy capitalism from the inside by becoming a bank manager. In Liverpool, my hometown, which at that time was pretty red, still is. That's the football team. I'm glad to see a lot of people wearing red today, which I assume is support for Liverpool Football Club. Dire. Paris Saint-Germain springs to mind. Anyway, they soon sussed me out in Liverpool as somebody they didn't really want there, so they sent me to somewhere I couldn't do any harm. And they identified Cambridge as an area that was extremely boring, world-class university, but bugger all going on. And so I couldn't do any damage. Unfortunately, this was about 1975 I arrived here. A couple of years later, a friend of mine, Matthew Bullock, whose father was Lord Bullock, who wrote Hitler's Study in Tyranny, was martyr at St Catherine's College, I think, in Oxford, identified as the opportunity to support knowledge-based businesses spinning out of the University of Cambridge. And Barclays in those days worked on a regional basis, and he persuaded the senior local director in the region Barclays should have a positive policy, undefined, towards helping these emerging spin-out businesses. And Matthew then had the good sense to be promoted, and the bank looked around for somebody to try and carry out this policy, and the only graduate they had in the area at the time was me. So default, despite the fact I got a degree in sociology, didn't go to Cambridge University, didn't understand technology, they thought I would be an ideal person. So they gave me the job. The first thing I did was went around the University of Cambridge trying to ascertain where the opportunities were. Everywhere I went, I was met with gloom and doom, and oh no, that's not the sort of thing we do here. Certainly no, we don't want any spin-out businesses. And after I'd seen the 12th professor who told me this, I thought, fuck this, sorry. I shall fight back. I said, well, surely to God, somebody's done something. And the professor sort of, yes, there was so-and-so. That was about 5 years ago. Very, very sad case. So, what do you mean a sad case? Is he sleeping in a cardboard box in Lion Yard? No, he's on his boat in the Caribbean or in his house in Spain, but he never did any good academic work ever again. So it did strike me that academics are different from normal people. But perhaps as somebody who was definitely not academic, there might be a role I could play. So I got involved, but not quite as people have envisaged. It wasn't looking directly at stuff spinning out of the University of Cambridge, but stuff that was in the sort of penumbra, Cambridge graduates, bright people, who've been associated often with research institutes like the CAD Centre. And that's where I focused my sort of business activities. I won't bore you with what we did, but when I first started, we had 12 companies which were identified as knowledge-based technology spin-outs. By the time we finished, we had 360, and that was about 1985 when the bank decided we'd done enough, they'd risked enough. Me providing equity through overdraft was fine, but there were limits to how far that could go. And the share price was not, of the bank at that time, was not particularly high, so they thought, enough's enough, we've done our bit, and they had. And they created a platform from which we've now got 1,500 genuine technology-based businesses, 50,000 people employed, $12 billion companies, 2x ex-FTSE top 100 companies, etc., etc. A completely different environment with a completely different set of problems. I then, having sort of got quite excited as a bank manager, not a good thing, I went to work for Coopers and Lybrand. I'm out of the frying pan in the fire, became even more boring, working for firms of accountants. Have accountants here, I apologise. But one of our clients was St John's College, and the bursar there was one of the genuinely great and good people in Cambridge. Most people in Cambridge seem to think they're great and good, but relatively few people are. Well, the senior bursar of St John's College, Chris Johnson, was definitely great and definitely good, and he had the idea for an innovation centre. So it was unlike this science park, because it was focused on start-up businesses, easy in, easy out leases. And working for Coopers, I suddenly realised I didn't want to be a consultant into my 50s, 60s, I'd die. But running this innovation centre seemed to be interesting. So after it had been open for 2 years and wasn't quite working, the college asked me if I'd run it on a full-time basis, and I agreed to do that in about 1990, and I ran that to 2000 till 2008, when I retired. I say retired, but the moment I got home on my retirement day, my wife said, "Where are you going tomorrow?" She didn't want me round the house. So I had to go out and do lots of other things. So in my retirement, I've worked with Anglia Ruskin University, and helping them try to develop their entrepreneurial activities. I worked with a number of funds, Low Carbon Innovation Fund in Norwich, which has a early stage but focus on carbon saving businesses. I work with the Finance East, which provides mezzanine finance. I work with Anglia Angels, again, which provides angel finance in Norfolk and Suffolk. I've worked overseas. Last consultancy assignment was in Saudi Arabia. Girls, I won't go back there again, and I wouldn't recommend you do either, even though they are becoming more enlightened. It's a dreadful place. Sorry if there are any Saudi Arabians out there. It's not my cup of tea. But never mind, and I've got to speak to a distinguished gathering of Chinese people about Chinese foreign policy in 2 weeks' time. I don't think I shall survive that. Anyhow, as I tend to say what I think without much thought, it's not necessarily a good idea. Personally, I've not been terribly successful. In fact, I've been a disaster on the sort of personal financial side. Still live in the same house we lived in 40 years ago and came to Cambridge. Can just about afford to look after a wife, two dogs, and pay for the school kids.
Did you say wife two? Wife two? Number two or wife as well?
It's just one wife.
But you're happy.
But she's not. I'll try hard. And finally, just so you can see how awful I am in the round, or I don't take myself too seriously, but one of the things that I have been is a director or chairman of a number of companies that are raising finance or developing or trying to raise development finance. So 2016, one of the companies I chaired spent 1.5 million, which they lost because what we invested in didn't work. 2017 was recovering. 2018, first 2 months, we made about £200,000 profit. So I make mistakes, I try and dig myself out of them, and I try and learn as I go along. So I don't think that I've got an answer to a maiden's prayer, even if I've been involved with thousands of companies and some of Cambridge's most successful companies. But I focus on early stage businesses, trying to help them refine their plans, introduce them to the right sort of people. For example, with Syndicate, were one of the people I was involved with in their startup stage, and introduce them to a number of people who then move them forward in a very successful business they are today. So I'm an easy in, easy out person, really. I go in at an early stage to help, and then I get out and let the professionals take over. So back to the professionals.
Right, it's basically over to you guys to tap into that wealth of information and knowledge now. So who's got the first question? One request, when you stand up, could you just say who you are and your business, please, for the benefit of the panel, and then ask your question.
Hi, my name is Adnan Rasool. My business is it's an online media company called Supercar Tribe, all about supercars. My monetization strategy is actually not even implementing this year. I mean, I'm looking to build the audience and the following before I look to monetize. Is that something that is that you see with businesses coming in where the monetization strategy is actually pushed quite far out, sort of 12, 18 months in the future?
So do you have a specific person or
No.
anybody?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we see startups, I think, who have no well-defined business plan or monetization strategy yet all the time. I mean, I would say when you have, until you have a monetization plan, you don't yet have a business. I would say you've got, you're in a mode where you may have a bit.
Sorry, if I could just add to it. I do have a plan.
Yeah.
I do have a strategy in place.
Yeah.
It's just that at the moment, I see the value really once the larger audience is there. So for the next 12 months or so, it's really building that audience. And then after 12 months is really when the monetization starts to kick in.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine to grow. You know, I mean, a lot of companies grow their market, and in the growth stage, a lot of high growth businesses will be losing money in the growth stage. So I think that I don't think there's anything that unusual in that.
Yeah, so I would say that we tend to see that strategy in two places. The first is if you're American, which is the general. It's a massive thing that happens in the States. And the States is, if you look at the venture capital in the States is very focused on market share. So if you look at companies like Uber and things like that, they'll be making massive losses for a long time, and it's all based on how their valuation is propped up by how many people they've got using their app or their product. The second place is where your IP is relatively light. And I imagine that in the case of a supercar media publication, that's probably the case. And the reason being is that when your IP, when your ability to patent is non-existent, your IP stems from your market share. And it stems from your ability to have customers who will continually come back to your product because they rate your publication or they're loyal to you. And in that situation, the concept of rapid expansion of your user base is probably the smartest thing to do, because if you don't have anything to protect and you have no user base, then really you have nothing. So I would say that it's not something that would potentially. I mean, there would be investors that would actually be quite attracted to that market, mainly because that might be what they specialise in, or that's their background. From an investment point of view, I think that there's no problem that is your strategy. I think if you've got a plan in place to say, look, this is why we're doing what we're doing, then that's not a problem, and that's something that we do see in businesses like yours. So I wouldn't be overly concerned to see that as something that you were doing.
I think it's more difficult to raise money in the circumstances that you define yourself in, and as been said, it's probably easier to raise money in the United States than here. My only comment would be that if you are going this route, given that it is probably more difficult to raise money, then you have to substantiate why you think the market will mature in the way that you envisage it maturing. I've just been involved in a company which has just gone into liquidation, in fact, which had the same sort of strategy. The problem was it didn't prove its market, or in the event the market wasn't there. And my concern, and I was chairman of this company at the outset, was that we didn't demonstrate in sufficient depth that there was a market. Because the person who was running this was very charismatic, happened to be female as well, the investors tended to be overwhelmed by the force of personality and tended not to look perhaps at the detail. But I should have been more insistent than I was and said, okay, so you're saying this particular market's going to open up, but I don't believe it. Prove it. And I think we should, and that's what we should have done, and it would have saved everybody a lot of hassle. So I think the important thing is, even if you don't write a formal business plan, is why you think this market's going to open, and how you're going to open this market, and what you expect to see, and why. And in a number of cases, that's not done, because people tend to be carried away by they're really entrepreneurial, or like the technology, without looking hard enough at, well, what basis is there a business here? So it's more difficult, I think, for you, but there's no reason why it shouldn't be done.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Mark. My accent seems strangely ambiguous as well. I'm from Kenya. So I run a sort of small seed to pre-seed venture fund family office in Kenya. And so I guess my question would be more to sort of the fellow early stage guys. My question would be around sort of pipelines and how you sort of work with your Series A guys and how you get companies ready for that sell-on. I guess a lot of these startups would also be really interested in that answer.
Okay. So in terms of when you say work with our pipelines, you mean specifically companies that are already part of our portfolio, or you mean companies getting companies
exactly.
as
So
part?
companies that you have in your portfolio. So sort of what sort of work do you guys tend to do, would have to do to sort of work with Series A guys and sort of say, we have a company that's ready to come out for exit from us tonight?
Yeah, okay. So Syndicate Room, so my answer to this is relatively simple, because Syndicate Room's position on this is, if I'm honest, a little bit standoff at the moment. Mainly because, like most people in this room, we are also still a startup to some degree. We've been trading for about 4 years. And really our product at the moment is based very much around helping companies fund. Now, value add is something that is becoming very competitive when it comes to early stage venture capital, when it comes to early stage investing, things like that. Because you see more and more funds, you probably know from your work, you see more and more funds popping up, and suddenly they're all arguing about what else they can bring to the company. That's something that we probably need to look at more going forward as well, and it's something that's really part of our plan going forward, is about offering more services to companies where we can assist them more. At the moment, our ability to help those is relatively poor. And the reason being is that we are still a relatively small team. We've only got about 25 in the UK. And that's our whole team. It includes our marketing, it includes our PR, it includes everything. We don't take a board representation on any of the companies that we fund, regardless of if they've got investment from our fund or if they've got investment from our investor group. What we do is we act as a nominee, and we sit as a nominee on the cap table, but we don't take board representation. So when it comes to the day-to-day operation of the company, we tend not to get involved. Now, if one of our entrepreneurs was to ring us and ask for assistance, then we could provide that on a very personal basis, because I might know one of them or whatever it might be. But really, we are a follow-on investor. So we follow strong lead investors, and we follow companies that generally have relatively strong boards in place. And in which case, these companies tend to go to those board members first, as opposed to us when they're looking for that sort of advice.
Okay. When I was running the Innovation Centre, what we were concerned with was trying to create a supportive environment where businesses could actually find appropriate investment rather than making direct investments. So we were focused on helping the individual businesses ensure that their business plans were robust. And one of the amazing things to me is that, having given advice on business plans over about 30 years, still the vast majority of business plans that you see are probably 65% shouldn't see the light of day, are capable of great improvement, given that they give it to you in the first instance. So a lot of the effort that we put in was just saying to people, let me see your business plan. I don't understand technology, but I'm sort of common sense type person.
Yeah.
And then reading it through and saying, well, you're weak there, you seem to be weak there, you haven't substantiated that, and what's the exit route?
Yeah.
Because too often people just, exit route? Well, but you've got to think of it from the investor's point of view. Well, they invest. There are thousands of people like you around, but there are relatively few investors. So, the investors have got the whip hand.
Yeah.
And getting across to people that even if they're going to make a presentation to a seed fund, Series A, whatever, both verbally or in writing, they've got to make an instant impact. As a friend of mine once said, you've only got one chance to make a first impression, which is absolutely true. And if you don't make a first impression, you're on a downhill slope to start with. I mean, a friend of mine was an equity seed investor, and he was working in Cambridge, although his home was in Bristol. And he was working with an existing fund, and he used to go out during the day to help the existing fund. When he came back in the evening, he'd find half a dozen business plans or whatever waiting for him. And he'd feed himself, and he'd watch a bit of television, then he'd go to bed. And his test was that if he went to sleep reading a business plan, it wouldn't pick it up off the floor. So, his bedroom was littered with business plans. You've really got to hit people up front. So presentation is critical. The other thing that's really important is helping enmesh people in networks. Somebody, again in the Innovation Centre, somebody said, came into my office, what did they say? Oh, I want to know who the world's leading expert is in healthcare economics, because I've got to do a presentation on Wednesday and I'm going to be asked questions, blah, 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 blah. And this was Monday. So you ring up the University of Cambridge, should know who the world expert in healthcare economics is. Oh no, we don't do that, or whatever. That was the excuse. Eventually did find somebody, and we made an introduction. In fact, it took us 2 hours to make an introduction, and the guy spoke. It was in the University of Geneva, and the link was made and help was provided. But you get asked very odd questions. Please, can you introduce me to 4 attractive Korean women, please? For what purpose? Is this moral? Is this immoral? No, we're doing a presentation to... Sorry?
Is that Cambridge Analytica?
we were well ahead of them. In fact, I was warned about when I was going to China for the first time. I was warned that I was prone to honey traps. I'm visited by MI5. How MI5 knows I'm prone to honey traps? I know Mrs. Harriet doesn't think I'm prone to honey traps. But anyhow, the 4 Korean women we did eventually find, and again we were told there are no Korean women in Cambridge. Maybe. And then, in fact, the person who came into my office after about 2 hours said, "You're looking really depressed." And I was looking for these bloody Korean women. And he said, "There's no Korean women in Cambridge." I said, "How do you know?" "Because my wife's a Korean woman." "Well, I got one." and he said she's got a knitting circle of other Korean women because they haven't got any friends. So I got 4 straight away, so it's brilliant. And then they helped make a presentation and they got a 75k contract with Samsung, I think it was. But be in your networks, link in to people. It's not just the common sense business planning, identifying appropriate source of finance, but it is helping making intelligent networking links, which is really important in what you're doing, and providing an environment which people can focus on their business. Like the Innovation Centre was set up, the rationale was so when the toilets didn't work, it was somebody else's job to fix them, not the company that's trying to raise £500,000. Never worked, but that was the reason for it. But so, there are lots of things you can do in order to help people focus and improve their chances enormously. Again, people that go through an innovation centre process, the failure rate goes down from something like 80% after 5 years to 40% after 5 years, something like that. So just by creating better environments, you can make a substantial contribution.
Thank you. I have a
Thank you, Walter.
question for us. It's actually quite a general question. My name's Carl Stein. I'm the founder of Train Thing. My question is not really related to my business. It's more, what are the most common mistakes that you find from early stage companies approaching you and approaching people within your network to raise funding? What are the things that you see that just drive you nuts and say, go away? Obviously, we've heard non-robust business plans, but are there any anecdotes or kind of words of advice you can give us?
What are the mistakes to avoid? So that's a good question. I would say, first, don't be late for meetings. It doesn't happen that much, but it does sometimes. I would say, certainly from my point of view and from my colleagues, we keep things simple. So in other words, don't go in there and utter a lot of buzzwords, and by the time you finish talking, nobody knows what the hell you're talking about. That happens a lot. So you listen to a pitch, and you say, the first question is, what do you actually do? Can you explain what you actually do? Right? Yeah. So keep it simple. Just say, look, we have a new kind of potatoes, and we plant potatoes, and we dig up potatoes, and it costs us £1 to make a sack of potatoes, and we sell it for £2, and we think that there's, we've sold 100 bags, and we think that we can sell 1,000, and if we sell 1,000, then we'll make this much money. Don't talk about it's very common for people to use buzzwords. Some buzzwords that totally switch me off at the moment are machine learning and blockchain, right? Because I'm not saying that there's nothing in it. There is. I'm sure there is, but the amount of application areas where those things are currently in vogue and fashionable and hot is very limited. There's very few areas where blockchain is actually adding any value or solving any problem or making any business sense. But as soon as somebody is using all these buzzwords in an area which obviously doesn't benefit from them, I switch off. I say, if you've got something to tell me, tell me what you got. Don't count on this kind of stuff. The other thing which makes me a little bit wary as well is, so we all like to support businesses that are going to be successful, that solve people's problems, that make people's lives better. That's obviously implied. Unless you have solved somebody's problem, you're not going to make a successful business. But people who put too much emphasis on how much good they're doing to the world, and there's no substance, how they're going to make money. We've got a social enterprise that's going to solve world hunger, without actually saying how this is going to become a sustainable business that's going to not solve 100 people's hunger, but is going to grow and solve 1 billion by actually doing something someone wants. There's another red flag for me. I'm sure when the other panelists give their answers, I'll think of something else, but those are the things that come to mind right now.
Okay. Great. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, can I add to a sort of anecdote?
Please. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're brilliant points, really, because it's common sense. Where is the common sense in all this? Can I understand it? And the number of times people obscure rather than clarify is just, especially in a place which is clever and wants to be clever. And you can, I'm afraid, the English disease, you can be too clever by half sometimes, or try to be. So I really endorse that point. I operate at a sort of more basic level, really, and I remember a lot of because I deal with volumes, really, or have dealt with volumes. So, and the common problem is people don't do enough market research, or if they do market research, it's inadequate. And the best example I can think of that was the automatic cat dispenser that I was asked to get involved with when I was a bank manager. And I was working in Barclays in Bennett Street in Cambridge, and there was a squawk from the senior local director, "Don't understand this, Harriet, come here." So I had to get up and go into his room. What? And he said, "Oh, we received this proposal from some bugger in Harlow, and it's for an automatic cat dispenser, and we don't understand what it is. Go and find out what it is." Okay, so go down to Harlow, meet the guy who's youngish, very sensible, very admirable. His father was Polish, came over after the war, but had fought in the war. Set up an engineering business, been very successful. So really good story. But this guy had developed this piece of kit, and he said it's an automatic cat dispenser. And I said, "Well, what do you mean? You pick up the furry moggies, you stuff them in a machine, and something goes, and bits of cat are dispensed over the entire room." It wasn't that. It fed cats, this machine, and there were various devices. There was the sophisticated version for the Cambridge cat, where the Cambridge cat walks in, plays with the computer, and milk and cookies are laid out. And then there's the Liverpool version where the cat walks in and bashes the machine, and the cat gorges itself and dies. But anyway, very interesting. And I said, "Well, why are you doing this?" He said, "Because I got cats, and when they go away, I don't know what to do with them really, or can't feed them, so what can do?" So I said, "Okay, have you done any market research on this to prove there's a demand for this particular product at the £599.99, which seems a bit of a lot for a cat dispenser for me, but..." "Oh yes," he said, he produced a plan which had been professionally written, and it identified the cat population of the United Kingdom, which at that time was just over 6 million, of which, and you could go on and found out there were 15 Manx cats in Bradford if you wanted to, from reading this bloody plan. But what it didn't do was tell you whether the owners of these beastly moggies would actually purchase the kit for the price that was asked for. So I said to him, I think you wasted a lot of money here. I'll go away and think about it, but I think you ought to do some basic market research, because this isn't market research, this is background, it's interesting, but it doesn't actually help you say that you've got a sustainable business here. Anyway, I went back in, I was working for Barclays, and as you know, bank managers are pretty miserable people, and they're also cat owners. So I walked into this, the two don't necessarily go together, by the way, in case there are any cat owners here, but they walked into the room and 20 Barclays employees there, and I said, "How many of you got cats?" 14 of them got cats. "Would you pay £599.99 to dispense milk and cookies when you go away?" No, 14 no's. Okay, why not? Because get neighbours to do it. Why should we pay money? Okay. So I thought, well, that's one sample, but they're mean. They're bank managers. They're mean. So that night I went round our estate. I live on an estate of 30 houses. I knew 15 of them owned cats. Knocked on the door. "Would you buy this?" And No, they wouldn't. Nobody, I couldn't find anybody who'd buy one of these for £599.99. So I went back to Harlow the following week, saw this guy and said, I'm sorry, but we can't substantiate. I can't substantiate that there's a market here. And he said, well, he was very rude and aggressive. And C words, F words and B words were used because Lloyds Bank have agreed to lend me £150,000 under the Small Firms Loan Guarantee Scheme, so you can sod off, Mr. Harriet, and Barclays are blah, blah, blah. And I said, don't care what you do, but I cannot substantiate there's a market for this. And I think you ought to before you borrow money. And we were almost at fisticuffs. Anyway, went away, and about 6 months later I checked up and he'd run out of money and he was bringing the engineering business down because there wasn't a market. Anyway, I told this story at a meeting of the Institute for Manufacturing in Cambridge, and somebody said, I made money out of an automatic cat dispenser about the same time. So I thought, shit, I've destroyed myself here by telling this story. And I said, well, how much did you sell your automatic? Was it for £599.99? No, it was £99.99. And how many features did it? It just had one. You could just get milk out of it, or cookie, or whatever it was. This other cat thing had 15 features. So it's not just a question of the general market, but the specific as well. Will people pay this price, and do they want all these features? Yeah. And in technology-based businesses, there's a tendency to over-specify. Yeah. So it'll do everything, but that's not what people want, and that's not what they'll pay for. Yeah. So my experience is generally, you may have a brilliant technical product, but make sure it's what people actually want as far as you can. There's no guarantee that they can say they want it, but you feel more secure if you've got something to back you up. It's not just a hunch. So market research is really important. And again, presentation. Sorry, I'll finish in a minute. Half-hearted again. I'll finish in a minute. It sounds stupid, but things like semicolons and commas are really important when you're making presentations to academics. And I was running, when I was running St John's Innovation Centre, we have a building on site, the Jeffreys building. It's spelled Jeffreries. And in those days, I used to have somebody who type up my notes for me. And this girl's called Jeffery_S when she was writing about this building, because I was writing a paper for the board. Anyway, it came to presenting the papers. And I presented a paper arguing one point of view, and a colleague wrote a paper presenting another point of view. And when the board discussed it, they were deadlocked, 3 each. And the chairman said, we will get the senior bursar, we'll go and find the senior bursar, see what he thinks about this. So they dragged the senior bursar in, who was pretty addled with port, but that's another story. Mr. Herriot, yes. What do you think of this? I thought Mr. Herriot's arguments were better until I realised he did not know how to use an apostrophe. Mr. Hood knows how to use an apostrophe, therefore his judgment must be more sound. And so Mr. Hood wins, Mr. Herriot. So it's stupid, but that's how sometimes decisions are made. And you've got to be so careful not to give people the opportunity for rubbishing you for silly reasons, really. So detail is important. I now give anything I write that's going to be used like that to my wife to read first. This is an unpleasant experience because I split infinitives, I don't know how to use colons or semicolons, but she makes sure I don't make a fool of myself in public, and my arguments aren't rubbished for the basis of a full stop.
Thank you, Walter.
So actually, I would say that this was going to give me some more ideas. And I would say just very quickly say, nobody cares about your 5-year forecast because everybody knows you can't forecast more than 3 or 6 months in advance, if that. And secondly, to emphasize what you were saying, making one sale means more than saying all I need to capture is 1% of the market and I'll be rich.
Good point, thank you.
William Fitzpatrick's my name. I've spent most of my life as a corporate financier, initially with Coopers in Ireland and more latterly with PwC. In Coopers and in PwC we had easier access to venture capitalists, PE houses, high net worth individuals. Early stage ventures, startups don't have the luxury of having a PwC behind them. So I'm just wondering, you would see hundreds of business plans, probably running into the thousands. How do we get up that ladder to the top of the list to get your attention?
Well, I guess make send me a business that is attractive to invest in, I guess, is the simple answer. I mean, it's I probably see about 500 companies a year, I would estimate. That's my, I mean, we had this discussion when Cambridge Angels were making our website, and it said our members see dozens of companies a year. So this is crazy. We see hundreds. So there'll be out of those 500, say roughly, a lot of them I'll just look at and say, well, the valuation's wrong. The I don't know anything about this area. It can't add value. Or this looks like a lot of rubbish. And then there'll be some smaller number that I'll look at quite a lot of detail. I'll read what the company sends me, and I'll do a bit of research. I'll ask the people in my network, and then look at it in detail. But basically, and obviously, apart from the fact, for example, in my case, I'm reasonably focused into what areas I invest in. So, if you're going to send me something that isn't in my area of focus, I'm the wrong person for you. So that there's nothing to help you there. But let's just say that you are within the ambit of what some particular angel invests in. Then make it simple, make a clear, simple case. There is a problem. We solve the problem. We solve the problem better than anybody else. Or there's no, and we have some protection, some barriers to entry, and the market's big. If you can articulate this message clearly, briefly, then you'll get my attention. If a company sort of waffles without being focused, then it won't. I mean, I think it's basically present something that someone wants, just like when you're selling a product to a customer.
I'm going to take some more questions.
I actually know Mike Ross well from Fig Leaves.
All right, okay.
So, sorry you missed out on that one.
Yeah, me too.
My question is around timing. So, I have a startup that we launched in New Zealand called Better Boardroom around online board reviews, and we will eventually use elements when time is right for machine learning to look at the mood in the board and look for issues. The startup here out of the UK is looking at corporate governance, but for private companies, early stage startups, not-for-profits education that are underserviced around governance. So listed company boards, experienced directors, some are useless and some are okay. But for most startups, they have no advisory board in place, or rarely do. So my question is in two parts. Firstly, do you think these startups should have an advisory board? I have an answer and opinion, but I'd love to hear from yourselves. Second, do you think there's an opportunity for forcing these organizations to actually have an advisory board before you can look at investing in these companies, as opposed to investing and then looking for a seat around a boardroom table or creating a board, which might be too late, having it earlier than later? It's open to anybody.
Gonzalez, your boss, right?
Yes. Yeah. So my position on that would be pretty simple. Regarding if companies need advisory boards, it depends who's starting the company. If the people that start the company are qualified within themselves to bootstrap is probably the best route. Bootstrap that company to a point where they don't need to give away options to an advisory board and I know you mentioned that there are a lot of boards around the UK which are useless because there are a lot of people who are potentially very accomplished people but not necessarily right to sit on the board for a certain company. Then the company should not feel obliged to give away options to people who are not necessarily bringing value. And a lot of the companies that we deal with, mainly because we run a lead investor model, so we're follow-on investors, and all of our companies have lead investment in place. A lot of the companies we deal with, we find that the teams behind them are already relatively accomplished. They've got experience in the area, experience in the sector, whatever it might be. Companies need to make sure that they're not tempted to bring people on for the sake of it, for the sake of filling a business plan, filling the team section of a business plan. And just to make clear, this is actually one of my key pet peeves about companies that approach me, companies with absolutely no information about the team whatsoever. They just miss it out completely. That really drives me away from companies. So my opinion would be that it's on a case-by-case basis, and it depends on the current qualification of the team. At a later stage, when it comes to scaling, then it's likely that the company would need some kind of outside support because, however, either you've got a management team of 6 or 7 people, or you're bringing on some advice from some people who've maybe scaled in that industry before. It very much depends on the company and who makes up the founders and the current management team. But I would say if you don't need to spend the extra money, because some board members obviously take a salary, or give away the extra options, then you shouldn't feel obliged to, and don't feel like that's something you need in order to progress. Feel confident in the team that you've got if that qualification's there.
Good. Thank you. Can I take another question?
Yes, I have a question. It's a follow-on actually to what you said before. I totally believe and I resonate with the fact that one sale is worth more than all the analysis of the market.
Louder.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that one sale is worth more than the entire market analysis you do.
Yeah.
So I'm in a bit of an awkward situation because I launched something perhaps a little bit earlier than I expected, and I didn't expect certain conversations that I'm having now to be happening now, and they're mainly based around valuation. How much money are you raising? So I've got a sample amount of data of what I think it could be, but I want to ask you, what kind of approach do you take when it comes to valuations and how much a company should raise? Do you have, a set formula, something that you believe works quite well? Should someone be conservative in that estimate, or really be like, we can back it up with evidence? Or?
Well, obviously, from an investor's point of view, the most impressive entrepreneur that you want to back is somebody who doesn't really need the money. I mean, if you want to be able to bootstrap your company. If you can bootstrap your company, that's the most impressive. And I would actually say to entrepreneurs, look, if you can bootstrap it, be independent, don't take investors on board. Just build up your own business. I mean, that may be working against my interest because I might be losing opportunity, but that's the best way to make a business. Once I'm on the inside of the company and I am an existing investor, then obviously, again, I pursue this argument. We should build this up as much as possible. We should build this into a real business as much as possible. And obviously, once you've built a real business out of it, in one way or another, or once you've increased the value, then you can ask for a bigger valuation. I think the valuations at the moment are a bit inflated for a variety of reasons, which we can go into. If you're really early stage, if you've got really, if you're having early conversations with investors where you're finding that you're being pushed to discuss valuation and the amount you need to be raising, and you're not ready for that, maybe you need to keep bootstrapping a bit longer. I mean, I don't know your circumstances. Maybe the opportunity is so urgent that you need to raise money now or you lose it. But I mean, so I'll qualify that. But I think generally speaking, if you find yourself in that position, try to build the business a bit further, build some proof points, build a case where you can justify your valuation to an investor. If an investor is saying, hey, this valuation is too high, then and you're confident that then it's not. Build some more proof points and then raise money. I would say when I'm a shareholder, I will always say let's raise as little as money as possible to achieve the goals we need. Obviously, if raising money means we can grow a much bigger business, that's a different story. But the more money you raise, the more dilution you're going to take. So try to make as much money from customers and as little as possible from investors. I don't know if that answered any of your questions.
No, it does to quite an extent, but certain businesses have different timelines of when they decide to make money.
Yeah.
As you're aware of that yourself.
Yeah.
So you've got to start realizing there is an urgency that comes in for certain businesses.
Yeah.
I didn't foresee that, but it's happening now, so the decisions have to change for that essentially.
I mean, ultimately, your valuation is whatever somebody's willing to pay for it. And obviously, you have to be a bit careful because there's always lots of people that are, at the moment anyway, in this market, that are going to pay a high valuation, but they might not be the best investors for you.
Yeah.
So, if nobody's willing to give you the valuation you want, then it's probably too high.
Sure.
But,
Can I
Thanks,
just
Thomas.
sort of
Do you want to add to that?
try to? I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
just to sort of link in the last three questions in a way. The PW. I used to work for Coopers and Lybrand, and when I worked for Coopers and Lybrand, quite a few people would come and ask you to help them. The problem was that I could never earn the charge out rate that Coopers and Lybrand wanted because you couldn't guarantee the return. So you were doing everything on spec, and eventually nothing worked out in a period, and you got garroted. And then the advisory board. Yeah, that's very good, but the experience I have is that people actually don't know how to use advisory boards very well. I think I've sat on a number of advisory boards who've never been consulted. Fair enough. But that's not really the purpose of an advisory board. And to back that up, one of the things, being an entrepreneur is by definition very lonely. And you can't afford advice. And you don't know how to use your advisory board, and so what do you do?
Chair.com.
Well, I mean, you can, if you can find an intelligent person to talk to bounce your business plan, your ideas off, that I think is tremendously helpful. When I first went to run the Innovation Centre, I was the sole employee. And I got, on a Friday afternoon, I got a bottle of wine and I just write stuff to myself on the whiteboard because there was nobody to talk to about the issues. And just articulating, just writing, just opening your mouth and letting words come out helps solve a lot of problems. And people used to come to, when I was a bank manager, I remember somebody came in and said, "Thank you very much, Mr. Herriot. I took your advice and I did X, Y, and Z." And I thought, shit, you're not supposed to give advice as a bank manager. You know, I get shot. What did I do? And I looked at my note, and for the previous meeting, I hadn't said anything. I just listened to this guy talk, and I may have gone, or pulled a face or something. But at least there was a response, and he could make a judgment based on that response. So if you can find somebody in your network who will spend a few hours a week or whatever, just looking at where you're up to, just bouncing ideas off, I think it will reduce the risks enormously, just the ability to articulate. Because it's no point in talking to a banker, or if you are going to a bank for money, because they got their vested interests, the venture capitalists got their vested interests, but who's on your side? Very difficult. Advisory boards are an interesting concept. And I remember one company that I was involved with, which floated on the AIM, was it? And they had an advisory board of great and good people who they never consulted. I mean, they went bust eventually. I think the founder went mad. But it was a shame because lots of good people wanted to help, but they weren't consulted. So try and find somebody who opinion you trust and use them, get the best out of them.
We've got time for 2 questions, but if we're really quick, we can squeeze 3 in. So sorry, I've got to go over there first and then here, okay?
I have a question for you. So, did you ever invest in tech-enabled professional services businesses?
You mean like legal services, like people who...
Legal, tax, or anything like that?
I haven't. I've looked at a few opportunities. There's probably one investment like that I had on the table that I didn't make, that I probably, with hindsight, was probably not a good decision. So I had an opportunity to invest in a will storage business, which turns out it's actually quite a good business. And a friend of mine invested and has been buying up this company, and he's doing really well. But I've seen a number of pictures like that, but I haven't. And probably the reason that I've not got involved in that mainly is, one, it's not an area of my expertise, so I'm not sure that I can add that much value. And secondly, IP, is there some barrier to entry? And usually there isn't, so that I would tend not to invest in that. But then obviously I've seen some good businesses in the area.
So you've seen other investors investing in that and then growing such types of businesses?
I've seen a sort of online will drafting business that a couple of colleagues of mine invested in. I've seen IP advisor business. I think Pacama is
They're one of our companies, Pacama.
Yeah,
they came through Syndicate.
Would you say you were a professional services business?
Yes. Yeah. So we're professional services in the way that we're a network, but we also provide technical legal services in terms of we're a nominee administrator. So yeah, and people invest in us. So yeah, and we've seen a couple come through the platform as well. It's not something that we've ever shunned. Professional services.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to?
Yeah. Hi, my name's YY. I used to work in early-stage venture capital with Such Invest, and now I'm in a private fund. I got a question for you. You three, in terms of angel investing, is the guy I used to work with. He said angel investing is like a fraternity club, where you just invest when your best friends invest, which kind of counterintuitive and go against the very first value proposition of doing angel investing is just to help exciting ideas that you're passionate about and buy into the team. What do you think is the solution to that?
This is a really difficult question because I think you're right, and the reason being is that you get, so when you look at angel investors, all angel investors want to think of themselves as innovative. It goes back to actually what Walter said earlier. Everyone wants to think they're a big shot, and it's not necessarily always the case. But herd mentality is something that follows investment all the way through from retail all the way up to the top levels of investing. And there's always a herd mentality. And you'll get investors say, look, I'm not looking to be part of the herd, and they're lying to you. They are. There's herd mentality everywhere. And the problem is that venture capital even over the last 50 years has been dominated by an old boys club. And if you look at some of the big accelerators, and these are the big accelerators that support some of the biggest companies of our time. So, for example, a good example is Y Combinator in Silicon Valley. Y Combinator, whenever they have their cohorts, they always have a demo day, and that demo day has been something that's been replicated across a lot of accelerators now. But Y Combinator always have a demo day at the end of their cohort, and what you find is that the demo day is essentially for other investors to pick up companies that haven't yet got investment. And what it's presented as is look, here are all our companies, and you can fight over which ones to invest in. Invest in the best ones. The reality is that a lot of the deals of Y Combinator companies, the top Y Combinator companies, and make no mistake, the people you know from your first week, which are going to probably be the top picks, the top picks have already got their investment, and they never make it to the demo day because the old boys club sit behind a closed door and they say, look, come in with me into this company, and they all support each other, and that's how it works. And then the rest, I don't want to use the word scraps because these companies certainly aren't scraps, but the scraps, as it were, are then put out to the rest of the market, and that's how it works. And there is certainly this mentality, and one of the key, I'm sure Thomas will say as well, and Walter from his experience, is one of the key problems that angels have, people who want to invest, is deal flow. That is a massive problem for people who want to invest. Deal flow is very, very difficult to come by. So I think it's very difficult in terms of...
Deal flow means lots of deals?
No, it doesn't mean quality deals. Yeah, quality deals.
Deal flow means good quality deals.
Deal flow means coming. I would define deal flow as coming across companies that I would want to pursue. That would be deal flow on a regular basis.
Okay.
So it's having access to those top end companies that people want to invest in, or you would want to invest in as an angel, and it's a real difficulty. I think we as Syndicate Room, we try quite hard to overcome that by we are the channel for deal flow. So we get deals that come to us, knowing that we've got a wide invest network, and then we have a wide network that we allow to invest through our platform. I mean, mainly, we only cater for sophisticated high net worth investors, so we do block out the retail, I guess. But that works for us, and that's something that we want to do because the companies that come to us tend to be quite IP heavy and things like that. So that's one route to try and help it out. But the reality is that the bigger companies are still dominated by this behind closed doors club. And if I'm honest, the only way to, and it sounds really pessimistic, but the only way to beat that is to wait for the old boys club to die. I'm sorry. Walter is not part of the old boys club. He's part of the Cambridge, the prominent Cambridge companies. And that's the reality. It sounds pessimistic, but reality is that these companies are always going to be hoarded. And there will come a time where this is more open. But at the moment, it's very and actually probably to give companies more ownership over their own raises. At the moment, companies are there's asymmetric information in the market. So companies are looking to raise, and then when someone comes in who knows what they're doing, they follow this person. And it's about giving those companies more information to make more informed decisions, to broaden the market. But apart from that, it's actually very, very difficult. And I'm not sure I fully know the answer. But you're right, it's a massive problem.
So, firstly, I don't know whether you'll say I'm lying or not, but firstly, I would definitely avoid the deals that are super hot. So in other words, the deals where everybody's rushing in, I will tend to go away from. So in other words, I consciously will generally not go to any demo days. I mean, for much the reasons that you mentioned, that the stuff you see there, it tends to be overpriced, overhyped, not so good.
Yeah.
That good deals, I see 500 companies a year, but the secret is not to see these many. The secret is to find really hard ones, the ones that you want to invest in. You really have to work hard to get. And basically, as an angel investor, there's two secrets. Three. three secrets to success, three key ingredients to success. One is being able to source good deals at the right price. Two is being able to help those companies exit at a good price. And in the middle is being able to help build these companies up, build them as a business. And all three are hard, and all three are secret. So I don't know whether I'm part of the old boys club or not. So, but okay, good, probably not. Because I probably would know if I was. But I mean, but I mean, I definitely find I really have to work hard and keep innovating to get across these good deals all the time. How do you find the good deals that nobody else has seen yet? And you won't see them at incubators, accelerators, at demo days. You just won't. Everybody's seeing that. Even angel networks. I mean, Cambridge Angels is a little bit different, maybe, but basically anything that comes to the usual standard angel network that is not very select. Like most angel networks, it's pretty easy to join. Anything that comes to those, everybody's seen it. It's overpriced. I think I've got a bit of a reputation for being quite tough when it comes to valuation. So I sort of self-select myself out of the deals that are really popular because I say, look, I like this deal, but even if it's a brilliant company, everything has the right price. If I can't get in at the right price, I'll be out. So what tends to happen is you see a deal and it becomes very hot. And I've even seen deals where it was offered to me, it's raising money at 3 million pre-money. Okay, let me have a look. And a week later, the valuation's gone up to 4 million. And a week later, the valuation's gone up to 5 million. I say, I'm out. If it's that hot, if everybody wants in, it's not for me. Because, if everybody wants in, everybody knows about this. This is not going to be a good deal. So I think I try not to follow the herd. And I think there is... Is that me or it's my shirt? Okay. So I'll sit still. So there is a rationale for. There is sometimes a good reason to co-invest with your friends, right? So in other words, anything that's very super oversubscribed, super popular, where you can't really negotiate on the valuation, you can't get a good valuation, or even valuation goes up, I go up. But there is a good reason sometimes to invest with the people that if people that you know and trust and know the domain area and are good, look at a deal and like it. That's a positive signal, right? If somebody who's a smart investor likes a deal, that is a positive signal. Mm. But secondly, there's another reason why it can be good to be co-investing with friends. In other words, if you've got friends that know the area and there's a group of you investing, there's more financial firepower behind that company. So, you know that if the company needs to raise another round, there is a group of investors that have deep pockets that are going to put more money in. They have a broader network. We're going to be able to raise more money through our network. So, there is an advantage. There is a value added to having co-investors, value-added co-investors in a group. So, obviously, you don't want to follow, every herd, but having certain people in your group of investors, on a case-by-case basis can be valuable.
The advantage is if you lose money, you lose it together, so it's less bad.
Well, I mean, I'm very individualistic. Like, I don't really care what anybody else is doing. I mean, if I will assess a deal on my own terms, and if I lose money, it hurts just as much. If a friend of mine loses money, it kind of maybe it hurts me a little bit that they've lost money as well. So I'm not sure that's necessarily a benefit, but definitely, the ability to raise more money, the ability to add more value, because some of these will also, if you have 5 domain experts on the board, or as investors and 2 of them on the board, that will be able to grow the company much better than if there's nobody or just one.
Old Boys Network.
Yes, sorry. I just become alive again. Just a couple of points, really. It is very, very, very difficult to raise business angel type finance or seed finance of any sort. So if you're starting up a business, you've got to have in your own mind what happens if I don't. And the vast majority of people actually still start companies, but with family, fools and friends money. So it's an informal version of what you've just been talking about, really. So can you, and the quickest way of of losing your friends is to lose their money. So it's not a good thing to lose money. But family, fools and friends, can you raise money? How can you raise money? How can you max out your credit cards? Can you sell your stamp collection? There's sort of silly things, but this sort of thing, what can I actually raise myself to get the business going, to get to a point where it does become more attractive? And too often people rush for the business angel finance. The other thing is, okay, can't do that. Can I soft start the business? I remember advising in Russia people how to soft start companies by black market cigarettes and all this sort of stuff, which they all did very successfully. Didn't need to go into high tech in the end. They all made lots of money out of selling black market magnesium or some sort of nerve gas or something that was not reputable. But soft starting, can you actually income stream the business? So from your point of view, the point is, if you can't think about or talk to, can I raise the money, and if not, what can I do in order to achieve my objectives? Don't give up. From the point of view of the venture capitalist or the business angel, just 2 points. One is, if I had enough money, which I don't, in order to be a business angel, what I would be doing is going in, not to the incubators, but going back into the university departments, back into what are the hosts, the key businesses, getting myself known as a sort of extinct but relatively sensible sort of person whose opinions are valued. Because too often venture capitalists and business angels come across as very arrogant, and it really is a turn-off and an embarrassment. One has been embarrassed by the way that people who are trying really hard are being treated by people who've got money, because people who've got the money have got the power and they can humiliate, and too often they do humiliate. Not true of Cambridge Angels, but it's true of a lot of angel networks. Individuals in those do humiliate, and it's not a good thing, and there's no need to be done. So there are more ways of killing a cat than battering it to death with a wet newspaper. So if you can't find your equity one way, look alternatively. Try and find key people who can give you advice about what you can do, what your options are.
It's interesting you said this about this people being arrogant. I got an email from one of the angels that I know who was summarizing a book he'd read, and he says that once you have 20 million, that's FU money, because you can say FU to anybody you want. You don't depend on anybody. I'm saying, well, really, I don't think there's any such thing as FU money, right? If you believe that a certain amount of money makes you able to be obnoxious and rude to people, you're on a loser. If that's your objective.
Yeah, that's the same talent.
Is it really? Okay, yeah.
That's what he mentioned. He is obnoxious.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Next question.
My name's Chris. I'm working on a communication and privacy product. So I am from the States. So first, just for anyone who has this myth, believe it or not, angel money has very rigorous standards right now in the States, and there's aggressive competition for angel money. Don't expect to raise angel money in the States unless you've hit a certain milestone with the company. And that's actually what I wanted to ask you about. You talked about quality deals, and I think it would be really helpful for you guys to share the scope of what a quality deal means. And I guess what I mean by that, what are the characteristics in terms of where you would see the company going in terms of ultimate size you'd be looking for? What stage would you like to look at a company at in terms of revenue and growth? Describe the characteristics that even qualify for a deal that can come into angel money. And obviously I know you guys are not, I don't know how it's broken out here. Honestly, I'm really not I don't know how the system works here, but the differences between what I'd say like institutional venture investors that would carry a company through late round investment versus the angel market here.
Okay, so if you go back, say 6 or 7 years, when the market was rather different than it is today, I would say, well, I want to see a company that's got, some really hot IP that's well protected, something really, really innovative technology, a top team that can deliver, some good revenues to prove that there's a market and that they can sell, and the valuation's got to be about 300,000 or 400,000. I'd say that's a good deal, right? So obviously, the market has changed. In those days, you could get deals like that. And so in these days, a company that's at that point will be pricing itself a lot higher. So personally, I think it's a very hands-on business, angel investing, right? So in other words, I don't come into it with a preconceived idea. These are the boxes you need to tick, and if you don't tick these boxes, then it's not for me. You have to look at the individual case and see, is this a good deal? Because if I say, well, you've got to be able to make 100 million. You've got to be a $1 billion marketer. You've got to be able to make 100 million in revenue. Then I will unnecessarily exclude these investments, which could be good. Obviously, you have to look at. Firstly, for me, the thing has to be interesting. So, part of the return that I get out of my angel investing is, having fun while I do it and learning something interesting about a new area of business, a new tech area. So if all goes pear-shaped and I lose the money, at least it's been worth it. So it's got to be interesting and fun. Secondly, I've got to like the people that I'm working with. So again, it's got to be, and they've got to be impressive individuals who are going to, are going to deliver on this business. And then, subject to that, it's got to be a proposition that makes sense. So in other words, if I'm investing in a low valuation, then the size of the business doesn't need to be so large. If the valuation is high, then the ultimate size of the market has to be much greater. So if you're going to be a successful business angel, let's not kid ourselves. Some people say, "Oh, we're doing this to give back to the community. Oh, we're doing this for that and the other." Look, if you're going to make, as anything, if you're going to have a sustainable business model, you have to make money. So in other words, I have to make a return. If I'm adding value as an angel, I need to be building businesses, help build businesses that are sustainable, that succeed. It's easy to give lots of money to lots of businesses that go nowhere. So the ultimate measure of success and of my criteria is this investment going to make money? And that's a bit individual in every case in some sense.
Great, thank you. Question of that?
Yeah, so I'm Ned, and I'm planning a sustainable tea business. But my question comes back to the valuation point. It obviously is a very relevant point in every investment case, and therefore the question from my side to you is, which are sensible or relevant valuation metrics for you? Maybe sample of all three of you. Is it? Do you prefer and look mostly at comparable transactions, or is it maybe PEG ratios? Or more exotic things like value per monthly active user or anything like that? Or is it that you really look at what's the demand and what's the supply, and is it reasonable that I can get a good return given the interplay of supply and demand?
For me, it's is it realistic that I'm going to sell this business in some number of years' time at a profit? Is it? If someone comes to me and say we're raising, I've literally had a company. It was an Israeli startup. They were raising money. They were pre-revenue, pre-product, but they had a really exciting prototype and exciting technology, and they were valuing themselves at $160 million, right? So, okay, well, maybe they're worth it. But then the question is, how many, in order for me to make a return, you're going to have to sell this company for $1.5 billion. How many exits at $1.5 billion have there been in the history of humanity? A handful. So how likely is it for me to make a return? Right? It's not going to happen. So for me, the metric is it feasible? Is it credible that someone's going to buy this business? And are there buyers that are going to be willing to pay the kind of money that they need to pay for me to make a return? If the answer is no, it doesn't matter what the other metrics are.
So the problem is when it comes to valuation is that there's a point where there is a minimum point where it goes from an art to a science, and it really depends on where your business is, because we have a lot of people that will come to us and say, look, I've raised around an SCIS round of 150,000. I've got to the point where I've got my product, and that product is ready to go out to market, and I'm looking to raise 300,000 to help me scale. How should I be working out my valuation? Should I just be doing it on my estimated revenues, or should I my forecast revenues, or should I be doing it on this, or should I be doing it on that? And the reality is that actually you probably shouldn't be doing any of those things, because that you're trying to pull metrics out your arse, frankly. You can't just use numbers that are that you don't have. So you're at a stage where you're in the art stage and you're not in the science stage. And when it comes to your valuation is a negotiation. It's a negotiation of what you think the company is worth, and it's a negotiation of what someone's willing to pay for that company. And you've just got to be in a position where and Thomas is right. It's all about what is the possible return on this company? And in reality, there's a lot of angels out there that won't get out of bed unless they think that you can make a fixed 50x return. They'll say, what's the point in me investing? If you're capping yourself out at a 10x return, no opportunity to make a 50x or 100x, then what's the point? If you're aiming for a 50x and you actually end up getting a 10x, then fine, I've still made 10x. But if there's no market there to make that 50x, then what's the point? My risk is for nothing. So the reality is that you've got to put yourself in a position where essentially you're guessing. It's a valuation where you're comfortable. That's really the key at the early stages. What do I feel comfortable with? Look at the equity you're giving away in your company, and what are you comfortable with, and what's the investor comfortable with? Because really, there's no metrics there in order for you to make an informed decision. Now, at a later stage, there will be going into your Series A or Series B. It's like you'll have some revenue. It's like you have some. Well, hopefully, you'll have some traction with your customers. It also very much depends on the sector, and sector is really important because sectors like what you're doing, sustainable tea business. I imagine that you'll be able to issue some sort of product relatively early, and you'll be able to get some relatively early traction. About 30% of our portfolio is actually in the medtech and biotech space. And medtech and biotech is very, very difficult because medtech and biotech have high turnover. High turnover. They have real longevity in terms of these companies probably won't exit for 10 to 15 years. Compared to a lot of companies probably aiming for 5 to 7 years in other spaces. They probably won't be making revenue, or at least significant revenues, for 5 years until their products get clearance to actually be sold. Their cash burns are incredibly high, so they've got really high requirements of cash. And again, that's has a big effect on valuation, so it can depend on the sector as well. So really, it's how comfortable you feel and how comfortable the investor feels. It's about how much they're willing what level they're willing to come in at.
I'm involved really in pre-starts, and there the valuation is very much more an art rather than a science. Yeah. And given that I'm trying to be a person of some sort of integrity, if you like, I'm trying to make sure that if I push things forward, that they're well founded and well thought through. And what I feel most confident on pushing forward is where you've got whether the individual or the management team are flexible, have common sense and are flexible. Because an awful lot of startups that I've known, as they mature, they don't actually produce what they say they'll produce. And if you look at Cambridge, Peter Dorr, who was probably the first person to make any substantial amount of money, Unipalm was it? What they made money out of didn't exist when they got their first round of funding. Domino, which was in inkjet printing, again they were printing I think rolls of wallpaper, and then just barcoding came in out of the blue. But they were flexible enough to pick up the opportunities. So when I'm looking really to sort of, in a sense, back people, what I'm looking for is, have they thought through what they're trying to do in a professional, competent way, and have they got common sense, and are they flexible, and are they hard-working? And it's the people and then the surrounding and how they build up their business plan and how they articulate that gives me some idea of whether I think they will succeed or fail. And I tend not to get, at a very, very early stage, not to get involved in valuations because they're just a nonsense, really. As you say, you can't 5 years forward. It's just a pre-start company. But flexibility. So as you as entrepreneurs starting your business, always, it's not just the idea you start with that's important. It's the idea that emerges as the world changes, because it is changing, and how you take your opportunities from that and make money out of it so you create a sustainable business.
Thank you, Walter.
Hello.
You go.
Let me stand or?
Yes, please.
All right. Hello.
Hello.
I'm James.
Hi, James.
I have a startup that I've been running that closed and we're restarting. It's called Group Hub, and what we do is we do experience gifts. We get groups of people to chuck in money and then give someone an awesome experience.
Right.
Balloon rides in Italy or wheel walking.
Wow.
Fun stuff. And I had bootstrapped it. I closed it because we ran out of money and motivation. I was sort of the founder, which is why I'm here on the course. And I'm concerned that if I go down the funding route, I'm going to lose all control, because that seems to be what happens. I also don't think that I want to set up the business in order to exit it at some defined point in the future, because I think I'd like to run the business, which is a great fun business to do. I think I've got some kind of problem solution fit in that we've run a whole bunch of these and it seems to work, and the average gift size is just under £500, which in this space is just completely different to other businesses.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to, but also the problem here is really interesting what you said. If you've got no IP, then IP stems from market share and customers who come back. You know,
Yes.
something that's protectable. And you said you wouldn't invest in something, something protectable. The process that we have is, I mean, there is no IP in it. It could be copied by somebody. So I'm kind of feel slightly that, okay, if I tick along on this nice little bootstrapping route, I'll go along, but it's not protectable. So what I need to do therefore is grow quickly, presuming that we can get to product market fit. But I will have a question. I just wanted to explain why explain this.
Yeah.
So therefore, if I take that advice, which sounds really smart, I'm thinking, okay, so what I should do now is get product market fit, prove that this works, that I've got the growth model that's going to work as well, because there's some real nice virality in there. And is that the point, if I was going to raise, that's the point to do it? Or what stage should I look to raise money in? And do I have to be realistic? And if I'm going to raise money, say there is going to be an exit here and it's going to be after X number of years, etc. Does that make sense? I'd like to ask all of you, because I think you've all got great perspective.
Yeah, do you know what? I actually, so I've worked with a couple of businesses before, so a couple of businesses that work in a similar space, but not directly what you're doing. And the whole idea of experience days is something that's becoming very popular. Obviously led originally by Virgin and Red Letter, and then nowadays you've got people like Truly Experiences. Yeah. And it's quite easy to, and you're right, it would be quite easy for them to put in a group feature. It's not something, you're right, it's not something that you can protect through patenting. So I've got to be careful, because I can't actually give, I'm FCA regulated, I can't give business advice, as it were. But I think that the problem you're going to...
Can we consider it a hypothetical case?
Yeah, hypothetically, hypothetically, I would say that a business that if you don't have anything there that you can protect or patent, then the reality is that as soon as you get any traction, you're going to be picked up on someone's radar, especially when you're looking at some of these smaller companies like Truly, who aren't at the level of someone like Red Letter, and are looking for some innovation. So, it's going to make it quite hard that you're going to have to essentially, you're going to have to make your market presence, quite solid quite quickly. And for that, you're going to need capital. Now, the problem you're going to run into is that if you have, and you don't have to define your exit point, and believe me, it's when people come in and say, look, we're going to exit in 4 years, it's rubbish. Okay, they don't, it's like forecast, they have no idea. What they're saying is that we envisage, and this is actually a good tip for all of you in terms of regulation and the FCA regulation around financial promotion compliance, never say we will exit in year 4. Say we aim to exit in year 4, because that can dig you out some holes later. But the reality is that if you're looking for equity investment, and that's what I specifically deal with, equity, then you're going to have to offer some kind of exit point. You're going to have to offer some kind of liquidity, because no investor is going to put equity into a high risk business if you go to them and say, I'm actually not really planning a liquidity point for you. The likelihood is that if you want to retain some kind of control, that liquidity is going to come from a public listing as opposed to a trade sale, because you don't want to be bought out. Likewise, someone like Red Letter Day might come to you in 4 years' time and say, look, we'll pay you this much. You might go, great, I'll take that, because by that point you're probably a founder who's put a lot of their own capital into it. You know, you've got bills to pay, you've got a mortgage, you've got a family, and someone might come along and offer you, 30 million for the company, and you might bite their hand off. And that's something that VCs quite often come across. VCs come across a lot of founders that want liquidity, but the VC doesn't want them to have liquidity. Traditionally, VCs don't want you to have that much liquidity. What they want is they want to invest in you, and they want to invest in you as a £10 million pre-money, and they want you to stick with it until it's a £200 million pre-money. What they don't want is you to then get a buyout offer at 20 mil, you sitting on debt and all sorts, credit card debt and all sorts as a founder, and then you to take that because you need that money. So what they'll do is they'll offer to buy some of your shares, and they'll give you a comfortable amount of money, say 3 million, 4 million, something that you can pay off, you can live a nice lifestyle and pay it all off, but actually something that's not going to demotivate you from carrying on going forward. The equity route you might find quite difficult if that's your plan, to stick with it, which I completely admire. That's absolutely fine, but that's something that you're going to have to consider. when it comes to raising equity. You might decide that you want to go down the debt route. There are debt routes out there now. People like Funding Circle and Zopper and things. There are peer-to-peer lending, and there's all sorts of debt routes down there. And that might be something to consider.
Thank you. Can I pull you back to the other side of the question, which is when to raise, not hypothetically? It's interesting because if I've got very little to.
Yeah, so I would say, and again, does not constitute financial advice, but I would say that if you're in an early stage company that lacks any kind of protectable patented IP, then you need to bootstrap probably to your product market, or at least your MVP. And then you probably need to raise a decent amount of capital in order to introduce yourself to the market and gain a market share relatively quickly. That's the point where I think that you would probably be needing capital. Whereas if you were in quite an IP heavy business, whereas if you were in quite an IP heavy business, you could bootstrap all the way up until your product was ready to go live, or even after you've made some initial sales, and then you could at the point you need to scale up the business in terms of things like manufacturing. That's when you could raise. You probably need to raise at a slightly earlier stage in order to get that marketing ready, and then have a suitable base.
Okay, we just about run out of time, so do you want to have?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so. I mean, obviously, from what you said, I think you probably need to make a decision. Do I want to stay in control of this and make this an organically growing lifestyle business, or do I want to really run with it? Because I think there's not a lot in between, right? In other words, if you're going to be raising equity finance, I think the only way you're going to get a VC type person or an angel to invest is, I think, you're going to say, well, I'm going to take over this market. In other words, this is an execution only play, there's no IP, but I'm going to be the number one in this market. And that's going to need quite a lot of investment. And that's going to require you to exit, because otherwise VCs and angels are not going to invest unless there's going to be an exit. So I think it's pretty binary. Either you say, look, I'm not going to raise any money, I'm going to grow this organically, slowly. I don't aim to be very big, but I aim to make a good, comfortable lifestyle business for me. Or I think I can deliver the number one player in this market, or somebody that's going to become such a threat to the existing players that someone's going to buy me out and then raise quite a lot of money. But then you have to be prepared to exit, I think.
Fair one. Would you say the same time to raise as well, then? Just a product market fit once we've got...
Probably,
possibly. I mean, I don't know that I can give a sensible... I would say I agree with it.
Yeah. Again, it's probably better. I mean, you're in the best place for that advice, being a judge. And that's the people's advice that you should take. Again, we can't give advice. I certainly can't give advice. Certainly maybe talk to some of the people that work within Judge.
We're going to have to take the rest of the questions offline. So in order to wrap up, can we just say thank you very much to these people?